Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from noobcoder.com, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about printing out our linked list. So to get started, you can see that we have our linked list here. We have a header that's pointing to the first node, our tails pointing to the last node, and our property size is equal to 4, and that's because we have 4 nodes within our list. So let's think of this logically. In order to print out the list, I need a starting point. So let's start at the header. Now we know the header is always pointing to the first node within our linked list. So printing out the first node is relatively easy. Since header is already pointing to it, I could just print out data. But how do I go from the first node to the second node? Well, each node has two properties. It has the data, and then it has a pointer to the next node in line. So I could take advantage of that. So what I could do here is I could print out the data in the first node, and then I could say header equals header arrow next to advance to the second node. So print out the data, advance to the second node. Print out the data, advance to the third node. Print out the data, advance to the fourth node. But what's wrong with this approach? Well, I just messed up my header because header is no longer pointing to the first node. It's pointing to the last node. So we can't do that. Instead, what we can do is actually create a temporary pointer that points to what header is pointing to. Now from here, I could use temp to iterate through our linked list. So I could print out the data, advance to the second node. Print out the data, advance to the third node, and etc. And you can see that our header pointer is still pointing to the first node. Now, when should I stop? So we should be using a loop, right? We're not going to keep iterating this manually. So we're going to use a loop, and the loop should continue until we reach what point within our linked list. So the loop should stop once we hit null. So let's actually take a look at this in code. All right, so from here, we have a method called toString. It's returning nothing, so it's void, and it takes in no parameters. So let's take a look at the first step. So the first step says create a temporary pointer that points to the first node. So we have to ask ourselves, who is pointing to the first node? Well, header is always pointing to the first node. So let's actually write the code. So I'm just going to come down here. I'm just going to say node star temp, and we're going to be pointing to whatever header is pointing to. So now let's take a look at the second step. Second step says create a loop that stops when pointer is null. All right, so I'm going to use a while loop, and I'm just going to say while temp does not equal to null. Remember, we want to print out each node, and we want to keep going until we hit null. So we're going to stop when it hits null. Then what I want to do is actually print out the data and advance the pointer. So I'm just going to copy these within here and put them within our loop. So obviously, the toString method is supposed to print out the contents of our linked list. So in order to do that, I'm just going to say cout, and I'm going to say temp arrow data, and I want to print out a space. Next step is to advance the pointer to the next node. And why is this step important? Well, we're going to get stuck with an infinite loop because temp is always going to be pointing to header. So we have to advance the pointer to the next node within our linked list. So in order to do that, I can just come down here. Temp is going to be pointing to temp arrow next. And this is going to keep advancing our pointer until we reach to the end. So now from here, I'm just going to come down here and print out a new line. So that pretty much wraps up our toString method. So let's actually test this out. All right, so let's scroll down to our main method. And here you can see that we're calling our default constructor for our list. Let's actually add stuff to our list. And I'm going to prepend just to test it out. And now let's call our print. So now I'm just going to save this. Let's bring up the terminal. I'm going to clear it. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to compile my main.cpp file. And let's actually execute it. And you can see our executed code being displayed here. So we're appending 1, so that's good. Append 2, add it to the back of the list. Append 3, add to the back of the list. Then we prepend, and you can see that it gets added to the front of the list.